Okay, so for the first time since the Cold War, the United Kingdom is basically tearing up its entire defense playbook. And in this explainer, we are going to break down the UK's 2025 Strategic Defense Review, a document that completely redefines national security for a world that, let's be honest, is getting more dangerous by the day.
Now, that might sound a little dramatic, but it's a direct quote from the review itself, and it really captures this massive shift we're seeing. That period of relative stability that many of us grew up in? Well, the core message here is pretty blunt. That era is over. The rules of the game have completely changed.
And you've got to understand, this isn't just about buying a few new jets or ships. This is a fundamental root and branch change in mindset for the entire nation. The focus is swinging away from things like counterinsurgency and shifting hard towards being ready for a full-scale conflict with a major global power.
So that's the big question, right? What does this new strategy actually look like in the real world? What's the plan? Well, that is exactly what we are about to dive into.
First up, a more dangerous world. Before we can even get to the solutions, the review starts by painting a pretty stark picture of the threats we're now facing.
And this slide right here really gets to the core of it. For the last 30 years or so, the military was built for fights in places like Afghanistan or Iraq. Now, the entire focus has pivoted to deterring a major war between advanced powerful nations. It's a completely different ballgame.
So, what are we actually talking about when we say new threats? Well, obviously, the war in Ukraine is the most visible sign that state-on-state war is back in Europe. But it's deeper than that. You've got nuclear language being used as a political weapon, constant cyber attacks that fly just below the radar of actual war, and a recognition that the West's technological edge, well, it isn't what it used to be. And here's a big one. America's strategic focus is shifting towards the Pacific.
Okay, this brings us to a really critical term you see all over this review: hollowing out. You know, after the Cold War ended, there was this idea of a peace dividend, which basically meant shrinking the military and spending the money elsewhere. In reality, what this did was create armed forces that might look good on paper, but lack the ammunition stockpiles, the readiness, and the modern equipment needed for a long, intense fight. All right, so we've laid out the problem. Now for part two, the defense transformation. This is the how Britain plans to fix all this.
So here it is, the new vision statement. And there are a couple of phrases here that you really need to lock onto. First, tech-enabled. Technology is no longer an add-on, it's the absolute core. And second, wartime pace. This is all about shattering that slow, peacetime bureaucracy and starting to move and innovate at the speed a crisis demands.
And of course, talk is cheap, right? Well, here's the number that shows they're serious. The UK is committing to spending 2.5% of its entire GDP on defense and wants to push that up to 3%. I mean, that is the biggest sustained jump in defense spending since the Cold War. It's putting your money where your mouth is.
Okay, another huge idea in this plan is the integrated force. It might sound a bit like jargon, but it's a massive deal. Think about it this way. For years, you had joint operations, where the Army, Navy, and Air Force would cooperate on a mission, kind of like an all-star team coming together for one game. What integrated means is that from day one, they are designed, trained, and commanded as one single cohesive force. It's a fundamental rewiring of how everything is done.
Okay, let's get into the pillars of the plan, starting with part 3. The NATO First plan. This is all about a massive, and I mean massive, recommitment to the NATO alliance.
And again, this isn't just a nice-sounding platitude. The review breaks down exactly what NATO First means in practice. From now on, NATO's needs become the starting point for pretty much everything the UK military does, how it designs its forces, how it trains, how it operates. We're talking about deep, structural integration here.
But it's super important to understand this point. NATO First does not mean NATO only. While defending Europe is the absolute top priority, the strategy is still global. So those critical global partnerships, like the AUKUS Security Pact with Australia and the US, they're not going anywhere.
All right, on to the next major pillar, winning the tech war. The review is absolutely crystal clear on this. The next war will be won by whoever can innovate the fastest.
I mean, just look at this table. The change in speed they're aiming for is pretty staggering. In the past, getting a major new piece of kit could take 6.5 years. The new target is 2. And getting a piece of commercial tech, like a drone or new software, they want that down to just 3 months. This is what they mean by wartime pace.
So how do you actually make that happen? Well, for starters, they're pumping £400 million a year, every year, into a brand new organization called UK Defence Innovation. Its entire job is to go out, find the best tech in the commercial world, and get it to the front line as fast as humanly possible.
So you have all this new tech, all this speed. What's it all building towards? Well, one of the crown jewels of the plan is this concept, the digital targeting web. Basically, imagine a military nervous system. It connects everything: drones in the sky, satellites in space, soldiers on the ground, AI sorting the data, and the weapons themselves, all into one seamless network that can find and eliminate threats at machine speed. It's a game changer.
And that brings us to the final and maybe most ambitious pillar. Defense is everyone's business. The core idea here is that national security isn't just a job for soldiers anymore. It's a job for the whole of society.
So let's look at the whole force structure. It's about rebalancing who makes up the defense community. So the number of full-time regulars isn't going down, but the plan is to seriously boost the reserves by 20%, pulling in more specialized skills from civilian life, while also making the civil service that supports them more efficient.
So how do you actually do that? How do you reconnect defense with the rest of society? Well, it's not just talk. There are very specific initiatives on the table. Things like a huge 30% expansion of the cadet forces, better education in schools about what the armed forces do, and a new law to make it easier to get industry ready in a crisis. And this is a big one. A huge investment, over £7 billion, to finally fix the often terrible housing that military families have had to put up with.
And at the end of the day, this is what it all boils down to. This whole of society thing, it isn't some fuzzy feel-good concept. It has a deadly, serious purpose: to build a nation that is resilient enough and ready enough to handle the immense strain of a long, high-intensity war should deterrence ever fail.
So that's the plan in a nutshell. A military that's more lethal, more integrated, driven by tech, rooted in NATO, and backed up by the entire nation. But, a plan on paper is one thing. Actually delivering it, that's a whole different beast. And that leaves us with the one massive question hanging over all of this. In a world that's changing by the minute, can this incredibly ambitious plan actually be delivered at the wartime pace it so clearly needs? Because the answer to that question, well, it's going to define Britain's security for decades to come.